AI spending is still very much on investors' minds as we look at the AI trade. And Bank of America is investing heavily in artificial intelligence and technology. Annually, the firm spends $14 billion on tech. It's allocating more than $4 billion of that on AI alone. Joining us for more, Hari Gopalkrishnan, Bank of America's Chief Technology and Information Officer. He's here with me in the studio. It's good to see you, Hari. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be here.
So I wanted to have you in and talk to you about this because, as you know, there are a lot of big debates going on around AI in the enterprise. Return on investment, how it's being used, is it really boosting productivity? What is it doing to how you think about your workforce? So let's start with the spend and sort of how the numbers I just mentioned and how that's being deployed around the bank.
Sure, and just to contextualize it, we serve about 70 million clients across every global landscape, every part of geography. And they have trusted us over the last few years. 94% of their transactions are fully digital. So they've been along with us for the transformation journey to digital because we focused on their client experience. We always picked up the problem with what they want, not what we want. And to do that, we spent, as you mentioned, $4 billion in new initiatives. And we have about 1 exabyte of data of all of our client interactions that we can leverage in a sensitive, secure, privacy-enhanced manner.
What's an exabyte, Hari?
I did not realize till about a year ago what an exabyte was, but think about, people talk about terabytes, then it became petabytes, and 1,000 petabytes is an exabyte. So you get to a point where you think about transactions, you think about behavioral, you think about all the signals when you process billions of transactions every year. We use that with our clients opting in for things like fraud, things like analytics, and then obviously as we create better products for them, and AI becomes the next leg of our journey. And so our focus has been is how do we shift from 2 years ago proof of concepts to the word this year really being diffusion. Go from demos to diffusion. That's sort of the punchline we have across the company. And we want to diffuse responsible use of AI across the entire company, across all of our 8 lines of businesses.
Okay, so how do you go about doing that? And full disclosure, you and I were participated in a conference recently, and something that you said really stuck with me in this discussion of token maxing and everything else. You said we go to a problem and we say, what is the problem and what's the best way to fix it? We don't go to a problem and say, how do we use AI? Right? So talk me through that process.
There's a lot of fog out there right now, right? Every week there's a new headline about something is good, the next week something is bad. Yeah. And you take a giant step back, and there's 3 things that have always been true and they remain true. Customer experience matters. You do things because your customers want it, care about it. ROI matters because you don't want to spend infinite amount of money getting small returns. And that's very important. And safety and soundness matters. You have to be able to safe, secure, you would say in regulated companies, but really across the board, you don't want to let your clients' trust down. Right. So you have to do those 3 things. To do that, you pick up the problem not by saying, gee, I found a new cool model. Or the new game in town is, I found a new harness. How do I use it to solve a problem? Often people come to me and say, look, I can use a harness to solve this. Payment exception processing. Wouldn't it be great if we could just run this agent? And I'd ask the question, wouldn't a simple deterministic set of rules up front do the same job? And they go like, yeah, actually it would. Well, you're going to spend a lot more money. You're going to not get a lot of return. You're not going to be able to reproduce the outcomes. What's the point of that? On the other hand, there are scenarios where these capabilities are hugely valuable. Knowing what's valuable and adds value, and knowing what's not and just throws away money is absolutely a competitive advantage, is something that we're very focused on.
Well, and as part of all of that question is the value of time, right? And because one of the big selling points of all of this is that it speeds people up, makes them more productive. Are you finding that to be generally true in the operation?
For sure, we talk about toil as something that no human wants to just do toil work. We all want to bring empathy, judgment to our jobs, serve clients. But typically, if I'm preparing for a client meeting, I may be actually spending a couple of hours saying, go to system A, what did you talk to her about like 2 weeks ago? Let me pull that in. What's her holdings? These are the holdings. Is there any negative news on those things? Let me go to system C. That's a lot of time and effort on non-judgment activity. That's really toil work. Instead, imagine a world where I just say, I'm about to meet Julie. What should I talk to her about? And the first draft is produced based on integrating the systems, creating a summary, and saying, here may be some things you want to talk about. And you go like, that's pretty cool. Let me actually tweak that a bit. Yeah. But I just saved you a ton of time. What do you do with the time? there's probably a bunch of clients I'm not talking to because I don't have time. So there's so much backlog of work that we still have to do that in some ways being able to deploy this to eliminate toil lets us get to the other more meaningful work that we can actually get done.
Okay, so talk to me about, can you give me an example in Bank of America of how you guys deployed this where you've just been sort of wowed by the result?
Sure. I mean, the client meeting is an example of that, right? So we actually went through and looked at our teammates and said, what does it take for you to have a journey from, I want to set up a meeting with a client, these are the things I may want to talk to them about, I want to schedule it, I want to have the meeting, I want to transcribe the notes from it, I want action steps coming out of it. That's kind of the day in the life of a relationship manager. We've deployed capabilities today to 25,000 advisors. So back to my diffusion comment. This was a 500-person POC in December, and now 25,000 of our teammates and soon 50,000 of our teammates will be equipped with tools that let them do this journey of a meeting, as we would call it. That's just one example. Imagine you're a credit underwriter and you're trying to put some data together to write a credit approval memo. Not the final underwriting process. We leave judgmental things to things where the human judgment applies, but there's so many steps in the process. So we looked at the work that they did. And sure enough, we find the fact that there's a lot of toil. And we already are in pilot for a solution that, again, by end of year, I would expect to deploy at scale. So there's this rinse and repeat of sit down with your user, figure out where the pain points are, figure out what the appropriate use of technology is. Sometimes it's automation, sometimes it's analytical and regression models, and sometimes it's AI, generative AI. Bring them together, build agents if needed, but then solve the business problem.
Have you found yet, because it sounds like you're still deploying all of this, you're still putting it in place in processes, have you found an uptick in revenue from those relationship managers, for example, yet as a result of doing all of this?
So we have a program called Operational Excellence. We've been doing that for years. And the way things get justified is you actually have to demonstrate that you're either going to take some expense out or you're going to have revenue on the back of it. And we then measure that. So our OpEx routines are pretty well established. We come in, we meet on a regular basis. So the program I mentioned around client meeting management has associated with it a certain projection. And typically you would expect that to be based on the leverage, which is if a banker can cover X clients today, they can cover X plus 4 tomorrow. And that translates. Now you could say, well, that's math and it's a model and whatever, but it's a start. It's a start, and we're spending a lot of time thinking about it, but even more so thinking about how do we make our clients and associates' lives easier.
Does that also mean you're then not hiring as many? If the one person can now handle more clients, how do you think about then the right size of the workforce in this world?
Well, I mean, look, just a couple of headlines for you, right? So we just announced a 4,000-person incoming campus class, interns and new campus hires. We have a program that has military hires that are coming in, joining us, who have served the country. We have hired a total of 20,000 people this year.
How much does that compare to past years?
I would say similar. The key for us is we look at opportunistically where attrition is there in certain areas. We look at saying, let that be our friend, but we need talent. We continue to grow talent. We think at the end of the day, there's a ton of work. You and I were chatting before about some new AI-related threats that are out there in the landscape. Someone's got to work on them, right? New software doesn't write itself yet. I mean, there's a lot of hype and whatever. You need to understand what clients need. There is so much work that we still need to do. We look at this as a way in which we can eliminate toil in the system to make the people we have and the people we bring in much more productive.
But it doesn't sound like that means a slowdown in hiring in the foreseeable future.
No.
Okay. And then the other thing I'm curious about is your line of sight to what I talk about day in and day out, which is the spending on the AI build out and the demand for, all of the data centers that fuel the models. It sounds like you guys are fully deploying this stuff. So do you see any kind of slowdown on the horizon, or is there even a steady run state that we reach at some point?
Well, I think for us, we have not tried to say, let's go do 10,000 things. We've not tried to say, let's just spray and pay, right? We've taken the approach of saying, let's understand the use cases. Let's understand the ROI. Let's understand what the right model for the right use is. So for example, we have a hybrid strategy. We have on-prem GPUs where we have our own infrastructure. We have cloud-based infrastructure available to us. We have open source models we use appropriately. We use appropriate, frontier models where appropriate. The ability for us to sort of say we have the ability to use the right tool for the right purpose and have an ROI against it kind of lets us think through this in a stepwise fashion versus panicking when suddenly you worry like, oh my gosh, token costs are going up. They are. We should be concerned about it. It is part of our strategy. We are doing that in a thoughtful, engineered manner versus reacting to the headlines. Because If you remember 6 weeks ago, the headline was token maxing was a good thing when you and I met.
And I never thought it was a good thing.
And we both agreed to that at that point, but yet there was we never did that.
Yeah.
Because again, it's back to the three things. Does it make your customer's life better? Is it ROI? And is it safe and sound? As long as it checks those boxes, that's where we go after.
The one other thing I wanted to ask you about is Erica,
Sure.
who is your digital assistant, who predated this generative AI wave. So how have you used some of the newer tools to make Erica better?
Yeah, I mean, Erica essentially is model agnostic in a way. So we have underlying models. We are historically been very sensitive about how much generative stuff we do there because it's client facing. Mm-hmm. We don't want any hallucinations. So there are ways in which we've sort of cleared that environment so it's safe and sound for us to externally deploy. We are looking to explore on an ongoing basis, how do we make the underlying models there more sophisticated? How do we bring in more of the generative capabilities? But internally, we've used the same set of technologies with different models to serve our associates, where we actually have the ability to have a human in the loop. We can actually create, for example, for employees, hey, look, I need to reset my password and I don't have my laptop with me or whatever. And now you've got the agent that is a little smarter, can actually have more language embedded in it. So we just look at fit for purpose, look at the risks, and we will continue to evaluate. And we have a program called Erica 2.0 that's well on its way. That's going to enrich Erica to be far more customer-friendly, user-friendly than the first generation was.
And it's interesting that you talked about using some of those tools internally. Do you use those as sort of learnings to then be able to apply?
For sure. I mean, there's so much. We have 200,000 plus teammates who are taking this all in. A big part of what we do is train our teammates. We have an internal group called the Academy, whose job it is really to train our teammates, upskill. Think about prompt engineering. What does a forward design engineer even mean? How does one become one, right? And part of that, we learn. We learn a lot from our teammates. We had listening sessions we just held in the first quarter where we heard thousands of our teammates tell us what works and what doesn't work with AI. That is great insight that we can then use in saying, they're also our clients. Let's learn from them. And so when we roll things out, we first roll things out to our associates who are clients. They give us a ton of feedback. Then we'll do a small state rollout perhaps, and then we learn, iterate, and then we do the big rollout. So it's just a virtuous cycle for us.
You saying that reminded me of a final question. I keep thinking it's a final question, but then you keep saying things that will make you want to ask more stuff. So when you did those listening sessions, as you know, there has been a big wave across the country that is anti-AI. We have seen it in town halls where people don't want data centers. We've seen it in commencement speeches. What did you hear? What is the workforce at Bank of America? How do they feel about it?
Well, from my perspective, it's how do you pick up the problem? And we don't pick up the problem, again, with we're going to do AI for the sake of AI. We don't pick up the problem with, here's all the job. We pick up the problem with how do we serve our clients better? We pick up the problem with, hey, you are in a call center. What gets in your way of doing your job amazingly well? And the teammate looks at me and goes, I wish I could get access to this data faster. I wish I knew what the customer was calling about. And I go okay, that's great. So the conversations are about serving clients and understanding how we can serve client with the empathy that the work that will result will create more time for them to then serve more clients in a better fashion. And honestly, we've been pleasantly surprised with the fact that now, again, putting aside what people, we certainly have been pleasantly surprised that people are engaged. They want to give us their feedback. They want to be part of the design process. You have to include them in the design process versus having it done to them. That's been hugely helpful for us.
Yeah, instead of imposing, you have to use this tool.
Exactly.
Really interesting. All right,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.